What's up everybody, welcome to Zero Mile ADV. Today we're doing a little bit of a different video. This video is going to serve two purposes. One, if you are looking for any information on some of the trails on the Grand Mesa, there aren't a lot out there, surprisingly enough, and it is a very popular area for ATVing and dirt biking. And so today we're going to talk about my first 100-mile day on the Honda CRF450RL dual sport, what that ride was like, how did the bike hold up, what were my thoughts there, and also some insights into the trail that is a basically kind of an off-road dual sport kind of double track road that goes from the Colbrand side to the Mesa Lakes area. So if you're familiar with the Grand Mesa, which is actually the largest flat top mountain in the world, super amazing area. If you're going to go riding up there, in this video we're going to cover a little bit of what it's like to ride Cottonwood Lakes Road from the Colbrand side to down, and you're going to connect onto the Long Slough Rd, which eventually dumps you out at Mesa Lakes area, which is kind of the most popular area at the Grand Mesa, on the Grand Mesa, and what that trail's like. So we're going to talk a little bit about the bike. We're going to talk about this trail. So it should serve two purposes. So if you're along for the ride, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment below, even if it's hateful. I love the tough comments. The internet's been really nice lately too. There hasn't been a lot of trolls. We like you trolls. Say something mean, so it's okay. I'm not sure. I guess we just have a good community of really nice people, so maybe not. So with that, let's get into it. Getting to the Cottonwood Lakes Road to basically on the Colbrand side. So there's a little town called Colbrand, and you can go up the Grand Mesa that way, as opposed to going up kind of the main Grand Mesa Highway, which will take you up through the little town of Mesa and then up past Powderhorn Ski Resort and then up onto the Mesa. You can get up on top of the Mesa this way, and it starts on a dirt road. So it was about 25 miles of road of mixed highway, basically pretty much all highways. So it was like interstate, so I'd ride on I-70 to get there, and then I got off, and then it's kind of like state highways to the town of Colbrand, and then more state highways to get to the Mesa. And I will say the Honda CRF450RL, the dual sport Honda, in some regards, it's just terrible on the highway. I do have the Dunlop D606 tires, so maybe this is also a point on those tires. After about 60 miles an hour, like the front wheel just gets a little kind of scary. Like it's real wobbly, and the last thing you want to get is like freaking death wobbles on the highway on a dual sport. And so, yeah, I'm kind of fastest I would go with those tires right now on the highway is like 65. Which is okay on this section because I think the speed limit is 65, so you can kind of hold the speed limit, but it's just not that great, but you can get there. I will also say long just sitting periods on the bike, the factory seat is awful. I have close to 600 miles on the bike now, and it hasn't not broken in, hasn't gotten any more comfortable. It's terrible. So the highway riding portion of this ride was, it was not great, not fun. You kind of just want to get to the dirt. But when you get to the dirt, everything kind of changes. First, when you're climbing up and you get to this kind of the start of the Cottonwood Lakes Road, which will take you up the Mesa, there's a big dirt parking lot. Everybody kind of parks there, unloads their ATVs, and then you take this dirt road up. The dirt road up has a lot of washboard. It's a pretty steep, pretty decent climb. I wouldn't say it's super steep, but it is decent. And the washboard section, I will say this bike is not great. There's no traction control, so like the Tiger 900, I can rip up that road. The traction control actually, in the off-road mode, does a fantastic job, and I can really rip up that road super fast. And I think the weight of the Tiger actually helps. Where the Honda on the washboard, you're in no traction control. That back end really washes out a lot, and you kind of feel it. And so it's like trying to judge where it feels like you can ride the Honda a lot seated, as opposed to on the Tiger you want to stand more. At least in my case, I feel more comfortable. And again, this is coming from a beginner, somebody who doesn't have a lot of great off-road skills. The Honda just is not real comfortable over the washboards. It's fine. It got me up, but the Tiger was way better. The traction control makes a huge difference. There is a traction control knob. I shouldn't say knob, it's just not the knob, but there is a traction control feature you can get for the Takamoto sells the Get ECU. Maybe if I added that, it might make a difference, and then the road wouldn't be so bad. Once you get up Cottonwood Lakes Road, you hook a right at the first reservoir there. You're going to hook a right at Kitson Reservoir, and at Kitson Reservoir, that road actually, it kind of flattens out. You're now on top of the mesa, so you're not really climbing anymore. In that section, as you're going past some of these lakes, it's just amazing scenery, a little bit of washboard here and there, but it's so minor compared to the road coming up. It was an absolute blast. So that first section, super fun. I would do it over and over again, a lot of fun. So then you get to a point where Long Slough Rd kind of becomes more of a kind of like 50-inch style dirt track. And if you're not sure what 50 inches means, this was something I had to learn, is that there are, when you're looking at trails for motorized use, some trails are limited to 50 inches width or smaller. So like dirt bikes or ATVs that are 50 inches, there are side-by-sides that are 50 inches. So once you turn off of Cottonwood Lakes Road and you kind of actually get on the official Long Slough Rd, the initial section is still kind of a Jeep road. A lot of, I hate this term, I wish there was a better term for it, but it's like baby head rocks, right? So rocks that are like the size of a baby's head that are just implanted in the dirt. A lot of those baby head rocks, but not so many. And so that first section, past some campsites and stuff, again, super fun. I've ridden this a lot on my Tiger 900, and so like I kind of knew where I was going, and it was super fast, flowy, and fun. And then I got to a point where I actually had turned around. So the last time I rode this, there was still a decent amount of snow up on the mesa, and this was probably beginning of June. I had taken my adventure bike up there, and I thought this was basically a dirt road that kind of connected through, because on Onyx backcountry maps it looks like it's a standard road. It doesn't really tell you how technical it is. It does list it as like, we don't know how technical it is, but there's kind of a steep climb. So this steep climb I got to, and it was really rocky and it was really muddy at the time. And so on my adventure bike, I turned around. So at this point, everything from here on is new for me. I have never ridden it. And I will say, going up this climb on the Honda was awesome. It really ripped through those kind of, again, baby head style rocks throughout the trail. I have found that like on the Honda, if I kind of get in the attack position, even going uphill, so like kind of low to the front handlebars, keeping my weight over the back tire but not seated, so keeping grip over that rear tire, I mean, the bike will just rip through anything. I will say, I don't know, because the bike is running tubes, I do have heavy duty tubes in it, and I do have DOT approved tires, so the sidewalls are stiffer, but I still ran like 19 PSI in the tires just because I was by myself. I don't want to get a flat. I have some tools that I carry with me, but I didn't want to get a flat. So ran a little bit higher pressure. I could probably run 15. I haven't done that yet because I just don't want to run a flat with all those rocks. But I will say that like at that tire pressure at my weight, the bike just ripped through that climb. And then I get back to like kind of the first lake, and I kind of stop and I take a nice photo at this lake, and then I'm like looking at the trail because the trail continues on. I'm like, okay, it looks like it gets a real technical here. I'm not sure you could fit a truck down this section, to be honest with you. This section of trail looks like maybe a Jeep could get there, mostly side-by-sides. I did encounter a Jeep later on. We'll talk about that. Pretty tight right here. So here I'm like, well, I'm going for it. You know, I was a little bit nervous. I'm like, I'm going to drop in. I had to ride this creek, and I rode the creek. Bike actually did really good. The traction, the D606 Dunlap's actually held traction really well in the wet, and I cut through. But then it just kind of progressively got more technical. And so the short is, so if you don't want to watch the rest of the video about this trail, the short is that basically from here almost all the way to the end to about 2 miles out, the trail just seems to get progressively more and more technical, more and more rocks, a little bit harder, and kind of slow going. So it's just really kind of picking my way through the woods. You're in deep forest, no cell service. I was by myself, which kind of adds an element to it, right? You're by yourself. You want to definitely be safe because you don't want to get stuck out there. It was a weekend. It's a Grand Mesa here on the Western Slope, so I was hoping I would see a lot of people. So if something did happen, somebody was likely going to come by. And then, yeah, as I continue, it just seems that there are more and more mud spots. So the Grand Mesa is just super wet. So it seems like even in mid-July, when it's 100 degrees down in the valley, it is going, it's 75 degrees up on the mesa, and it is very, very wet. So there are lots of mud holes. Came across a lot of mud holes and had to navigate getting around those, right? Because I don't want to get stuck in the mud and have to try to dig this thing out. Like, can I get it out by myself? That is the one thing about the bike. It is still a little, close to 300 pounds. So it is easier to, I've always dropped this bike. It seems like every time I ride it, I drop it. Knock on wood, I've never dropped the Tiger. Maybe coming up on the Colorado VDR, I probably will drop it. But I feel like every time I go out on the Honda, I'm dropping the Honda. But because it makes me want to push harder, which is the unique thing about this bike. Like, I'm not afraid to drop it. Like, it's got the plastics. I feel like the plastics don't feel super cheap. I mean, I've dropped it every time I've gone out at this point. And they've got a few scuffs and stuff, but all in all, the bike still looks great. And so the bike makes me want to push. So in a number of circumstances, I got to points where in areas that were technical that I have never ridden a motorized vehicle in areas this technical. So this was all new for me, and I was really kind of pushing my limits. So as I continue on, the rocks and the mud just seem to get worse. Like, it's just more and more rock and more mud holes and trying to navigate. And actually, what's unique is in my motorcycle journey, if you've seen my other videos, I bought a KTM 1290 Super Adventure S, so big full-size adventure bike. Mostly the road-oriented one first is what I got. But I feel like every time I ride, it makes me want to get a smaller bike, right? So then I step down and I end up getting the Tiger, and now I talked about how like I made my off-road skills feel so much better, and now I've got this dual sport, and now I'm like, oh, it's a 450, and I'm like, you know what if I was riding a 250 two-stroke, right? If I would have trailered up there. That's the downside, is I could not, I would have to trailer the bike there. And the one reason I was interested in a dual sport is like to be able to do dirt bike style trails without having to trailer it there. And yes, while like riding the 30 miles or whatever to get to the trail wasn't the greatest, I got there, right? And I didn't have to do anything else. And so I didn't have to unload the truck. I didn't have to loop. I could do, in this case, I did a point to point and then came down the main highway. So, but it really does make me want to get on a 250 dual sport, like go rent a Yamaha or a KTM or a Gas or any of the 250, like ride a Beta 250 two-stroke and just see what the difference is like how much riding these bigger bikes does my confidence seem to feel even better on the 250 two-stroke. The other piece that I also realized is that on the map, I'm like, oh, it's probably 10 miles total, right? It's probably 10 miles from the main reservoir, Kitman Reservoir, or whatever it was called, to Mesa Lakes is roughly what I'm thinking. I thought it was going to be dirt road, similar to like what I rode getting to the Long Slough Rd. Maybe they call it Long Slough Rd for a purpose, because it is very technical. But as I got more and more back there, it just became more and more technical, big rocks. And I actually came across my first person. So for me, psychologically, if you ride by yourself a lot, this was a bit helpful, because now I'm like, okay, I see somebody else. So there are other people coming down this trail. And I went on a Saturday hoping it would be busy, because generally when it's hot in the valley, there's a lot of people on the Mesa. And so I thought, if I go on this main road, there should be a lot of people. So if something happens, somebody's going to come along, and I don't have that far to hike. But I didn't see anybody up to this point. So I'm probably 12, I think, because it was 28 miles. It turned out to be 28 miles total. So at this point, I'm probably maybe 14 miles in, and then I meet this guy in this Jeep, and it's technical and it's slow going. And especially for a rider with me with like limited skill set off road, like it is just slow go through the technical stuff. I don't want to wreck. Like the worst thing I do is ride outside my limits, hit a rock, wreck the bike, then have to hike 10 miles out, right? So it's better to just go slow and take my time, pick my way through, definitely ride at 80% of my limit and not at 110 or 120 and put myself in a bad situation. Because things like also go through my mind, like don't be an idiot and wreck, freaking break your leg. I did have motocross boots on, I did have protection on, helmet on, but one wrong move, if you broke your leg, then I can't hike out and I ain't moving the bike. And what if nobody comes along? And there's no cell service up there, so it was a little bit nerve-wracking to get by there. But then I saw this Jeep, and so then I was like, oh, thank God. People are coming down here, and you can see by the Jeep, like, it is pretty technical, and this guy's going pretty slow through there, and it never really eases up. But then, and then I asked the guy, I'm like, oh, because he's like, oh, you by yourself? And I'm like, no. He's like, oh, well, ride careful. And I was like, oh, how much further is it? And he's like, oh, you still probably got 10 miles or so to get out. Well, I know probably about 14 miles, actually, before I got to the main highway again. And and then he's told me like, oh, you're going to come across a surprise. We're going to get to the surprise at the end, because some people make stupid decisions. But you'll see at the end, towards the end of this video, as we talk about the trail. So then as I'm cruising, then I'm start hitting some meadows. And now I'm getting a little more confidence. So I'm like, oh, I can go a little bit faster, like these super beautiful green, lush meadows that are everywhere. And in some of these areas, a little bit smoother. So you can actually get out of, like, for me, get out of first gear into second and third gear in some spots and kind of actually cruise and put some distance under your tires. So yeah. So I'm cruising, and I think with this road, the thing about it is there's all these kind of false summits, for lack of a better term. Like it feels like, okay, I've gotten through the technical section, it's gonna get a little bit faster and more fun, and I can kind of rip through here, and then the technical hits again, right? And then you're back slow. And for me, a lot of time in first gear, picking my way through all these rocks. And then at one point, I think a cow jumped across me, because there's some cattle that are open grazing up there. And so now I'm kind of like really deep in, right? The bike is doing great. I feel comfortable on the bike, but it's a lot of work still. You know, like all these like technical climbs and maneuvers, like it does get tough, and it does put some. It is a workout. So for, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, motorized sports, it's no workout. You get on a dual sport and you get in some technical areas, it is definitely a workout. So like I'm getting a little bit tired. I did bring water with me and stuff, and no food though. Maybe I should have brought a few snacks, some energy for the ride. And, you know, and then it just gets even more technical. I get into this section where it is just big rocks, big tight moves. It's uphill. The GoPro effect doesn't really do it justice. I mean, for me, I'm like, I'm way back here. Like I'm past the point of turnaround, right? Like I'm fully committed, so I'm getting through this. I think even in one section, getting through these rocks, I was like, ooh, I'm riding some gnarly stuff. Again, for my skill set. If you're good, if you've been riding dirt bikes for a long time, you've been trail riding, and you could probably rip through here in like maybe 45 minutes, and it took me 2 hours, right? It took me 2 hours to get basically 28 miles roughly, I think. I think it was about 2 hours, because I was gone for about 4 hours total, so it's about an hour there on the highway, 2 hours on the trail, and then like an hour home. So yeah, it took me 2 hours to do 28 miles. So if you do the math, you know, you're going 14 miles an hour, you know, roughly. And then eventually, you know, I'm in this technical area, and it's real technical. And then I see some side-by-side. So I'm like, okay, again, it's kind of one of these false ends. The bike is doing great. And I'm like, well, at least there's other people, right? Again, that keeps going through my mind. So like if something happens, I can walk. I'm likely to find somebody, right? So there's more people. So I see these side-by-sides. Long Slough Rd. I mean, I really now understand the term of the ride, because it's like pretty much the very beginning, the very end are fast, but the rest of it is a lot of big rocks. Again, terrible term. Wish there was a better term for it, but a lot of these like baby head sized rocks that are just embedded in the ground and just in clusters. So there's a lot of them. So it's not like you can really rip through there. I mean, you probably could. If you carried speed, you might be able to skip through it. But again, I don't have that skill set. I didn't want to wreck, and at speed, it would be pretty punishing to wreck. And so like, again, I'm just kind of picking my way through. I don't want to hit a square edge rock and get a flat and then be stuck and then have to hike 5 miles out. And then you get to a section where like on Onyx off-road maps at Bowl Basin Reservoir number 2, it does show it as a 50-inch limited track. So it does show it as like it is 2-track. I didn't see any signs. So a lot of times on the 50-inch trails I've ridden, you have the width things to make sure, you know, you're only within 50 inches. You can't squeeze a Jeep or something through there. It is marked as a 50-inch. It is very tight, but I didn't see any signs or markers. So as long as your Jeep could fit through the trees, then I'm assuming you can get there. And I'm not sure how the other Jeep I was with had to have gone that way, because I don't know of any other roads. But that's the other thing I've learned about Onyx backcountry maps is not all roads are listed. We actually went and rode up in another area near Vegas State Park, and we were following a trail, which was pretty fun. It was actually a 50-inch trail, probably not as technical as this one from a rock standpoint, but it was narrower. It was like a true 50-inch trail. We actually had to take another road because the trail on Onyx just ends, like it's not where it shows it is. And then we ended up taking another trail, which wasn't on there, and there were a bunch of other roads that you could take a Jeep up, and they weren't listed on the map. So if you have any suggestions for good maps, I've been using Onyx. It so far has been good, but then these last couple trips, I realized it isn't that great. Potentially. Maybe it is good, and maybe I'm just not doing something right, but it's definitely missing a lot of other roads in the area. So at this point, you know, once you get to Bowl Basin Reservoir number 2, you're still about 6 miles out at this point. So you've covered a decent amount of distance. You've covered like 22 miles at this point, and you probably, if you're new like me and you don't have a lot of great off-roading skills, you know, you've been out for like an hour and 15 minutes, you know, at least in the dirt. And there's you know, and I hit like, and it just seems like on this trail you get to these meadows, and it's these beautiful meadows, and it's fast and flowing. You're like, sweet, okay, I'm gonna be able to kind of open this thing up and have fun. And then again, you're back in the trees and back in the ruts and the mud, and I actually had to do another kind of like technical creek ride where you come up to the trail and you stop and you're like, oh, where does the trail go? Because you see a creek, and then you realize you actually have to ride in the creek to then get out to the trail on the other side. So I had to do another creek ride. And then finally, again, more kind of technical uphill big rocks. And I will say you know, it's hard. One thing that's hard is I haven't ridden any of the other dual sports. So I haven't ridden like the KTM or the Husqvarna, or I guess any of the KTM brands. I haven't ridden any of the other dual sports. I kind of knew what I wanted on paper, and then I found a really great deal on this Honda, and so that's kind of how I ended up with it. So I can't tell you like how much better those bikes would have been. I have heard that those bikes are lighter, but you do pay a premium for them, right? Like this bike is under $10,000 brand new, and I got mine for way less than that, and it only had 60 miles on it. I will say though, like getting through the technical stuff, and now as the bike has broken in, I feel that it has gotten a lot better down low. So if you saw my other video on the bike, one of my bigger complaints is that like you can't, like I kind of like to tractor through stuff because I want to like pick my lines and be safe, right? Trying to ride at 80% of my limit, not 100. And as the bike has broken in, it has gotten better. I will say I do have 2 mods though that also help with this. I do have the Takomoto Get ECU, so I did get the ECU, and it does have the toggle switch to go into enduro mode. So it does pan the power back quite a bit, and I feel like that does help. And I also did get the throttle tamer, the G2 throttle tamer, GS throttle tamer, whatever it is that most people get. I did put on those 2 mods, but I do feel that aside from that, because I've ridden them for a little while, that as the motor has broken in, it has gotten a little less like throttle twitchy, and I'm learning the bike. I have read some comments on my other video like, oh, it's the perfect bike, don't change anything. Motorcycles are meant to like build and have fun and turn into your own. So why would you not want to mod it out? For me, I like building bikes. It's fun, like mountain bikes, road bikes, gravel bikes, motorcycle bikes, whatever. Like it's fun to kind of customize them and build them your own. Like I like wrenching. It's fun. If you don't buy it, leave it stock. Maybe it's great. But I have definitely made some mods to it because to fit the riding style and what I wanted to do. And I feel like it just helped. Yeah, it's just fun. So with that being said, I don't think it's perfect out of the box to some of the other commenters out there. And I like modding my bikes. Not for you? Cool. Don't do it. Buy it, ride it stock, whatever. So finally I get, I get to there's a split, and you can kind of go either way. And at this point in the Long Slough Road, there's like 2 options that kind of meet back up. And I went right, and as I was about to go right, I finally saw this surprise. The guy in the Jeep had told me that somebody had, in a BMW 3 Series, decided to go off-roading, and it was stuck back there. Well, when I got there, they obviously called a tow truck because it was being towed out. So as you can tell, like the door doesn't close, like the door was still open, the freaking tires were flat, so they're basically towing it out on the rims. But at that point, that's kind of when the relief setting. So I'm like, okay, look, if a 3 Series BMW got back here, it cannot be that technical. I feel like I've gotten through the most technical sections, because there were technical sections like, I have a decent sized truck on 37s, and you'd be real slow and some big like kind of rock crawling rocks in some of those sections. It'd be too tight and too technical for my truck to get through there. In a Jeep, you could probably easily do it. You probably wouldn't want to do it in like a stock Jeep, I don't think. You probably want like 33s or 35s on a Jeep probably to get through there. But, seeing a BMW and a tow truck, like if a tow truck got there, you're like, okay, cool, we're going to rip. And for the most part, it was pretty fast at that point. It was a lot of like 2nd and 3rd gear stuff, more wide open meadows, and really just kind of being able to cruise. But again, going a little bit slower, trying to ride within my limits, because you don't want to come up quick on a corner, right? Like where most motorcycle accidents happen, in corners and intersections, right? So it's like, again, trying to be safe and riding through. But at that point, once I had gotten to that turnoff here on the map, from here out, it was pretty quick and pretty fast, kind of a good double track where you can hold a decent speed, and it was pretty fun. So if I'd go back and ride it again, like at this section, I probably would be able to go a lot faster. And it just, in this section, if you've ever been to Costa Rica, I was in Costa Rica last year on a business trip, and we'd rented this Airbnb, and I was like, the road to get to the house was like awful, like nice house, and like you had to get to the house. It was like this, it's almost you want to bring your dual sport to Costa Rica so you can get around and get to your freaking hotel and your Airbnb. But that's what this section of road kind of reminds me, like if you've kind of been outside of the city and kind of into like Monteverde, where we stayed, and there's like Costa Rican style roads. And then eventually I get to a point where I saw like a 5th wheel camper and a lady walking her dog, and I pretty much knew at that point I was pretty much at the end. Big wide open meadow, and then you kind of cut in the trees, and then you dump out Mesa Lakes. So if you have any interest in riding in the Grand Mesa and you want to do this, just know that this is actually not like a standard dirt road to get to a lot of the lakes like on the other parts of the reservoir. Like, it gets pretty technical. It is called Long Slough Road for a purpose. I will say that for me, The Honda was amazing. It rode great. I talked about how I drop it almost every time because it makes me want to ride harder. It makes me want to push my limits. And that's why I got it, you know, especially trying to prepare for this, the Colorado BDR. Like, I wanted to ride more technical stuff, and the Honda is doing that for me. Like, it's allowing me to push things harder. And when I go ride there's a closer loop that's only about 7 miles from my house in the BLM land. And when I've taken the Honda out there a number of times, I've now gone back on the Tiger. And going back on the Tiger, it's not as fast, right? But it's way easier. Like, I get on the Tiger and I just kind of tractor through, and I'm like, oh, this is nothing. Because I've had, you know, I've gotten through, and I've had a bike that can handle far more than my skill set. And so far it has been an awesome bike. And honestly, it's been my most favorite bike to ride. Like, it's the one I want to grab the keys to the most right now. Having a lot of fun building my off-road skills, which in this journey of ADV riding is completely different. If you watch my very first video about buying the 1290 Super Adventure S, I was like, I want to ride some roads. Like, it's scary for me to ride on the road right now, you know? And I was like, I don't know if I have any desire to do any technical dirt riding. But having ridden on the road, or but now having like gotten more confidence on the road, actually with the Tiger, you know, riding some other dirt roads and some more technical stuff on, you know, the first section of this, and then now getting the Honda, like, riding off-road is really fun, and I want to get better at it, and the Honda is like pushing me to ride things that normally I would like, no way, I'm not riding that, but where now I'm like, heck yeah, it's super fun, right? So it'd be interesting to see where my skill sets are this time next year, and like, how much does my mindset change? Like, am I now going for, am I getting my 250 two-stroke and riding hard enduros, right? Like, did I go from full-size leader bike to now two-stroke and hard enduro, right? Like, I'm going to get my Red Bull helmet, you know, those sort of stuff. It would be cool, right? It'd be super fun. Anyways, if you've made it this far, long video today, but the Honda's been amazing. It's been great for me. I definitely, hopefully, want to ride some other dual sports. I do want to, maybe I'll find some time to go rent just go rent a 250 two-stroke and some of these other bikes, and I'll give you my feedback on it. I do have a trip planned to actually ride the Honda in Moab. So later this fall, when it cools off and it's not 120 degrees out there, I'm going to go out for I have a trip planned, do a day. Don't know what I'm going to ride yet, but I'll be sure to bring you along. We're gearing up for the Colorado BDR. It's coming up soon. I'll bring you along for that. Should be good. I feel like now that I've taken the Honda and some of this other stuff, the BDR we're doing should hopefully be really fun. I should hopefully feel really confident. That was the whole purpose of getting this bike, to help me prepare for this and give me an excuse to go ride more dirt, right? Anyways, so if you stay this long, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and until next time, stay safe out there.